we often get calls from clients who think they want marketing, but really what they want or need is sales.
And vice versa.
Right.
I do sales consulting and training, and I get calls from people who say, I just need to build up a demand generation engine.
Right.
And that's where I say, well, someone like Eric is a better fit for you because, you need those complementary skills.
On this episode of The Claw, I'm joined by Todd Callen with Acsellerate Sales Advisors, and we are going to discuss what it takes to establish a good sales organization within your company. A good sales organization meaning that it's not reliant on the one business leader to sell every deal. That Todd provides us with kind of 3 tips and 3 things that you need to look at, so make sure that you tune in to The Claw. Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist of Liger Partners. I'm joined today by Todd Callen. He is with Acsellerate Sales Advisors, and we're going to talk today about how sales and marketing are not always, they're talked about as the same department, but we do kind of different things. So,
Right.
Todd, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Good to be here.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your background and what you do.
Sure. Background is 25 plus years of sales leadership, helping companies grow their sales organizations, both nationally and globally. And decided after being on the road all the time and away from home, and I have 2 children, a son who's 14, a daughter who's 12, that I was missing too much of my kids growing up and being around the family. So I made a decision that I love what I do, but wanted to move it to being around more and consulting for small to mid-sized businesses that are generally in the Atlanta area.
Okay.
So I help, I give business owners their lives back
Okay.
by basically removing the frustration and giving them hope of building out a sales organization and kind of taking that off their plate so that they can focus on the business.
So tell me, so you give, I love that as a mission, right? Because marketers were like, what's the mission, right?
Right.
So your mission is to give business leaders their lives. So why are their lives missing? What's going on?
Because they're business owners who know the industry they're in, whether it's manufacturing or distribution or technology. But generally, the business owner is not a sales leader.
Yeah.
So as they start to grow the company and they try to build out a sales function, maybe they're hiring their first couple of salespeople, maybe they're trying to manage salespeople, but they're not really aware of how the sales function operates. They're frustrated. They're tired. They're usually working weekends and nights, and they're having some stress related to growing the business.
Yeah.
So I'm able to come in as a fractional sales VP
Okay.
and help company owners manage the sales process and function, put in the right sales process, leadership, infrastructure, and allow the sales leader to get out of that muck and focus on the business. And that includes hiring salespeople and managing salespeople.
Got it. And having been in that space, I think you and I met for coffee
Right.
a couple months ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is always that's a huge challenge.
Right.
And there's so much confusion between what is sales and what is marketing.
Yeah.
There's this like assumption that they're the same thing. You talk about, you're like, we have a development group, we have a product group, and we have a sales and marketing team.
Right.
It's like, they're not the same thing.
Right.
There's this like very big difference in the way that they work and they function.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, sales and marketing in many ways need to be aligned because you have the same vision of what your product or service does and kind of how to go to market. But on the other hand, like you said, they're very different.
Yeah.
Sales really has the accountability for being very much laser focused, kind of that sharpshooter, where you're very precise about who you want to go after and what types of companies and people you want to engage in conversation, because it's just you one-to-one. Marketing really is going after the broader market, creating brand awareness, creating opportunities for leads and suspects and those kinds of things. So it's really important that marketing and sales work together. And we see too often sometimes an adversarial relationship, right? We were just talking right before we started where, the salespeople inevitably in a lot of companies say, well, where are the leads? I don't have any leads. And marketing says, what are you doing with all the leads I'm giving you? I've given you lots of leads,
Right.
and how come you're not following up? So it's really getting marketing and sales on the same page and working together and recognizing, as you said, where they're different, but where they have to come together.
Yeah, and the fact that it is a different language.
Yes.
I mean, we often get calls from clients who think they want marketing, but really what they want or need is sales.
And vice versa.
Right.
I do sales consulting and training, and I get calls from people who say, I just need to build up a demand generation engine.
Right.
And that's where I say, well, someone like Eric is a better fit for you because, you need those complementary skills.
Yeah. And so in walking into companies, kind of these small to medium-sized businesses, and you're in the process of giving that leader their life back because you're probably the best salesperson. Like that's the leader typically is the best salesperson.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
If there's an inside-outside kind of concept, but still talking about your business, knowing what it does, how it works, selling kind of the widgets. So where do you start?
Right. Well, what you described is exactly the owner challenge.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the I built this business up, or I know the business really well. My relationships are solid for years. I know people in the industry, and they know me. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that doesn't scale.
Yeah.
So sometimes the owner, when they're looking at hiring salespeople or building out a sales team, will say, just look at what I do and go replicate it. And I always say that's kind of like, the old Michael Jordan. It's like, just watch me and do what I do. It's like, well, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So really, the discipline is how do you take what's up here, the tribal knowledge, and now processize it and institutionalize it in a way that has sales steps and mechanics and a CRM where you're tracking opportunities and you're talking a common language about where things are in a sales cycle so you can forecast more accurately, and you have a discipline that allows the owner to take what's in his or her head and extrapolate it and scale it so that when you start hiring salespeople and managing a sales team, it's not dependent on the owner being in the room. It's not dependent on the owner saying, well, let me just swoop in for the big meeting on every meeting. They can't be everywhere all the time. So that's one of the barriers to growth.
Yeah.
Is they've hit a point and now it's like, well, I can't hire 5 more of me.
Right.
So I've really got to create a sales process. And that's usually something they're not familiar with. They don't have experience with that. So they need help with what does a sales process look like? How do I hire good salespeople? When I talk to business owners, inevitably the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges they have is they say, I'm really terrible at hiring salespeople.
Yes.
Because they all sound good to me, right? And it's like, it's tough to hire good people in any function, let alone salespeople who are seasoned professionals at selling themselves.
Well,
right?
Exactly. Yeah,
everything sounds good.
The best sales pitch you ever gave was about yourself.
That's
right.
right.
Like you never sold anything after that.
That's right. It all went downhill after that.
Right,
yeah. So how do I even go about interviewing and filtering the right salespeople? Because those are hires where if you make the wrong hire, you could lose a year of time, and you don't have that time.
Oh, yeah, because depending upon your sales cycle, like for our company, it can be 8 months.
Right.
So you can't really tell someone, well, you haven't sold anything in the first 3 because
Right.
you weren't going to sell anything in the first 3.
That's right.
You've just established those frameworks and things like that.
That's right.
So you, in my experience, because I've hired a lot of bad salespeople in the past and had to get rid of them, and it's you wait too long, like where you wouldn't on other things. Like if you hire someone who's doing a tactical skill, you kind of know quickly.
Right.
Can this person do this thing? Right? Can they write? Can they do a graphic? Can they whatever?
That's right.
But with the salesperson, there's just like this time frame and this wait, and there's sort of indications that maybe look good or not. Right.
Right.
So
and that's why it's so critical to have the process and the tracking and the accountability in place so that you can identify more quickly when things aren't working out, because so often without that, you go into, well, they seem busy.
Yeah.
They're in a lot of meetings and they're active, and so they must be doing well. And of course, it's the old activity and productivity are 2 different things.
Yeah.
So if you have the right foundation and process and accountability in place, you can quickly start to realize, okay, this person's not tracking against that very quickly, and I need to make a change.
Okay, so you said something earlier in the conversation that I thought was really important in talking with some other sales leaders about specifically the current times we're in and trying to grow and, get new salespeople in place. And you use the word tribal knowledge.
Yes.
And so tribal knowledge is the concept of we're in a room together, you just pick things up.
That's right.
Because you hear how I say something, how I do something. So in the virtual world that we live in now, so, we're in pandemic land and everybody works from home and they think Zoom calls are great.
Yep.
And I'm a work from home guy. I've worked from home since like 97. So I am not against it, right? I am not against it.
You were a pioneer of the
I
work
was a
from home.
pioneer.
Yeah,
I was like, I had DSL installed in my house. I had a fax line.
Oh, look at you.
So all that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I believe in it.
Right.
But from sales, but I was working for a sales organization. And the way I learned how to do sales is I was on an airplane, going to a meeting, working with salespeople.
That's right.
there was this collaborative nature going on. So if you are a leader, and most leaders in these organizations they're wolves, they don't, they kind of want to hang on their own, and now we're trying to replicate what they do into a sales process.
Right.
The tribal knowledge piece of it, like how do you extract that out of the leader and turn it into a process?
Yeah.
And is it because they think they've done something magical, or is it just that they're not really doing anything magical?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot there to kind of unpack, but I think starting with kind of this idea that we're in a different world, and I don't know if we'll ever go back to how things were perfectly. So the old days of a salesperson jumping on a plane, as you say, building relationships with their customers and clients, being in front of them, having that dinner or golf event or whatever, now is, okay, you've got 30 minutes on a Zoom call. What do you got, right? So it begs, from that aspect, being really precise and sharp with your sales process, meaning the questions you ask, being able to deliver value right away. And this is where marketing is so helpful in these situations. Give me the value proposition. I'm a big believer always in it's about you, not me.
Yeah.
Meaning, let's talk about how I possibly can help you and what's going on with you versus let me tell you everything about my product and service, right?
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
No.
So it's really important to get the right sales process, the right qualification, the right messaging, and be able to ask the right questions more quickly and more pointedly, because you won't have that ability to build the same relationships maybe you would have in person.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good, and I want to go down that track, but the question I have around tribal knowledge is, so probably incorrectly.
Yeah.
But in my past world of like trying to get a salesperson up to speed, I'm just like, if you could just sit at my right.
Yes.
If you could just, and when you're starting to work with the person who doesn't have a sales process in place,
Yes.
they're selling a thing.
That's right.
And it's in the leader's head.
Right.
And now we don't really have that opportunity, right? You don't have the salesperson. You're not in an office with them. They're not overhearing how you're having conversations with clients.
That's
They're
right.
not. That's the thing that feels like it's really broken.
Yeah,
right
the
now.
enablement and the process. So to that point, you really, this is where the discipline of having the process and going through the steps of taking the tribal knowledge and putting it into a process. And this is where a good sales leader does this and helps with that. They understand the framework and okay, so to your point earlier, is there magic in this? Well, maybe some of the magic is when you mention these three things, or when you ask this question and then it leads to this conversation. So those are the things you want to put into a qualification process to say, make sure we hit these steps. So once you spend time, and this is where a good sales leadership comes in, with the owner and the tribal knowledge, and then you can document it and put it into the right sales process, that becomes the enablement map for all sales hires going forward. And then if they have questions, of course, the owner is always available to help, but it's not dependent on the owner to sit in a room for 4 hours and download everything they know. We've got something, once we do it once, we should be able to put it into the right framework and steps and allow the scale then for the growth.
Yeah, and it reminds me a lot of, I like to cook. That's my kind of like side gig, right?
Yeah,
and
I like to eat, so that's a good,
it works
good
well.
partnership.
My wife likes to eat too, so that works. And so when you start cooking, you're very strict with the recipe. You follow it,
Right.
and then you get to a point where that's not how you work at all, right? It becomes kind of like second nature. And sales has always felt that way for me, And going in, like I've taken some cooking classes, and you go in with it, and they tell you something like, "Oh, that's how that works," right?
Right.
So translating the sales process into something that's almost as simple as a recipe.
But I think that what you just said was a really good analogy, if I'm understanding it right, which is to get to the point where you now can be in the kitchen after all these years and you just, I feel a spice here and I know what to, but you started with the recipe.
Right.
You couldn't have gotten there unless you started with the recipe. So the idea is you still need to document the process and the recipe for the sales team from the tribal leader. And then through experience, eventually that person goes, I get it. I've done enough of this now where I know where to go. It's in my head now.
Yeah.
But if I could get that into everybody's head, that's great. But you got to start with the discipline. Over time, experienced salespeople are not sitting there looking at their sheet. They get it, but you got.
They're not going to sell anything.
That's right. That's right. But you got to start somewhere.
Have you seen there's a new show on HBO or HBO Max? It's Severance. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that show yet?
I have, yeah.
Okay, because he starts and he's got the script he has to read at the beginning. It reminds me of that kind of like concept. So I'm an operations guy at heart.
Yeah.
I love operations. Like I love to take something, touch it once, never again.
Yeah.
And I will openly admit to you of all the, so like for all parts of my company, I can make it run very operationally.
Okay.
And when you talk about turning sales into a process or an operations,
Yeah.
I almost hear dial tone. I literally do. Like if like taking onboarding a client, like that totally makes sense to me from a process perspective, getting an invoice out to them,
Yeah.
doing all the follow-up. But then when you talk about taking sales and
Yeah.
turning it into like the same concept,
Yeah.
it almost feels too rigid, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Like,
do. And I wouldn't say it's the same exact. So there's a difference between having a sales process and a sales script.
Yeah.
I think sales is part science and part art.
Yeah.
So that's why not everybody is successful at it.
Yeah.
But the process is really okay, what happens when marketing turns a lead over? What's the process by which a rep is going to engage? What are the qualification things that matter? What are the value points we have to hit? How do we then categorize the conversation into a model that says, here's where I am from a sales stage so that I can have predictable forecasting? That's the process part, right?
Okay. And so it's basically establishing the railing, but within that railing, you have to have a little bit of talent.
Effectiveness, a lot of talent. So
Yeah.
there's an effectiveness factor we really haven't covered, which is one, if the process is, okay, I have to now engage and understand these three things from you as a prospect, the way in which I do that and the effectiveness with which I make my pitch is really critical. So that's an important part of any sales process. So it's not a follow by the numbers type of script, but if you don't have the process in place and just the steps that a rep is supposed to follow and what are the important key value points and all of that, then they're just out there winging it, and we go back to that tribal knowledge conversation.
And so in companies that you're working with, and I'm assuming this is kind of the first step, right, is to find to figure out the sales process, right, for a company. Is that true, or would it be something else?
That's absolutely one of the first steps is to say how do you do it today, right?
Yeah.
So if I were in a room with if you're
is it easy for leaders to describe that to you how they do it
you have to
today?
guide them, right?
Yeah.
You have to guide them, and they say, well, I go to a meeting and I
run into a person.
Yeah, and I know this guy from 20 years, and da-da-da. It's like, okay, so let's unpack that. What is it you say? What do you do? Why is that effective? And then they start to, and they start to kind of unravel. And then it's our job as sales leaders to take that and say, okay, I understand now. These are the important points. And you kind of give that to a good sales rep, and they go, okay, I can take that, and in my own voice, my own language, my own effectiveness,
Make it my own.
I can make it my own.
Yeah. Okay. So that in that first step in establishing that process, so my question to you is around commonality.
Okay.
So from company to company, because everybody sells something different and blah blah blah. But I know from a marketing perspective, we do a very similar thing. Like we do the same thing over and over again, just in a slightly different way based on the company we're working with. Right? They all follow a process. Like we're like, this is how we onboard you. This is what we do. And within that, there's different things, but I can pretty much deliver anything we need to deliver within that same frame,
Right.
regardless of if you're selling ink or you're selling insurance or whatever, right? So is that true on the sales side as well? Is the process common or is it crafted from company to company?
Yeah, great question. So it's very similar to what you just said, which is I think every business and every business owner will say up front, just to give you a heads up, our business is not
very
like
different.
Everybody else.
Right?
Right?
We're special.
And I'm sure you hear that and you smile politely.
Yeah.
And in your head you go, no, not really.
Yeah.
Right?
That was our newsletter this week. So we were
Okay.
like, you're special. Everyone is
You're special like everyone else. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that sense, respectfully, every business is a specialist in their business. They, whether it's, polyurethane elbows or software or retail, whatever it is. But yes, the basic sales infrastructure, process, and goals are the same. So putting the sales process in is really more about taking what works across all companies and kind of just right-sizing it for that company. Yeah. So there's just like there's some adjustments that you make, some tweaking, but you're still going in with I have to unravel this from the tribal knowledge. I got to put it down and document it. I got to go hire some good people and make sure they're following this process, make sure they're effective, make sure our forecasting is good. Are they using a CRM properly and just not a spreadsheet or Slack or something like that, right? So
there's nothing wrong with Slack.
There's nothing wrong with Slack. it tends not to produce the greatest forecasting reports.
I have a reputation internally. Slack is my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
So it's like it's like somebody built a tool for me.
Yeah.
It's like
it's great.
all like just fast and
Yep.
go and
Yep.
whatever. There's no real history to it.
That's right. See, so yeah. So it's getting all that and saying, okay, at some point someone says, well, how are we tracking for revenue 6 months from now? And I better be able to answer that. So yeah, but I think every industry is a little different. Every company is a little different, but a good sales process, accountability, leadership is really kind of the same across all of them.
Okay. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist of Liger Partners. I'm talking today with Todd Callen, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Thanks so much for watching the Claw podcast. We'll be back after this short break.
When I first met the Unicorn Marketing Agency, everything was rainbows and, well, unicorns. They promised overnight marketing results for my business, leads my sales team couldn't keep up with. Once I signed up with them, they didn't even hold up any of their promises, even after months. And the only thing they gave me were excuses. After a while, communication with them became spotty and they were hard to get a hold of. Eventually, they stopped responding altogether. Overall, I lost a total of about $23,000 over a 4-month period. And I lost a lot of valuable time and energy.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw, the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm talking today with Todd Callen. He is with Sales Acceleration Advisors.
Acsellerate Sales Advisors.
Acsellerate Sales Advisors. I think it's because
my email sales acceleration.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. That's where I'm picking. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Say that again. So that way I get it right.
Accelerate Sales Advisors.
Accelerate Sales Advisors. And we're talking about the sales and marketing that you all like to lump together, which really don't fit together that way as much.
Not in a lump.
Yeah, no, they're not a lump. We're two different parts or two sides to the conversation.
That's right.
So in the first segment, we talked about, getting the tribal knowledge out of the person who's kind of typically your leader, the best salesperson, the one who knows how to really talk about the business and what the business does.
Yeah.
And so once you have that, so like we have this documented process for that salesperson to that leader to step out, what do we have to do next?
Yeah. So now begins, how do I find good salespeople?
How do you find good salespeople?
And retain good salespeople, right?
Right.
And manage good salespeople. And so this is where we start to bleed into the sales management aspect. We spent some time before the break talking about sales process, and you asked a lot of questions around, it's important, but you can't just have a process. That sounds kind of rigid. And,
right.
And there's the process, and now there's the ongoing management and accountability. And we were talking earlier about in a virtual world, how do I know what's going on with my sales team? How do I make sure that they're being effective? How do I get check-ins that matter? And this is where good sales leadership comes into place. A good sales leader has the experience to come in and help offload that hiring and that murky world of hiring salespeople and evaluating salespeople and take that on. Because really good salespeople are critical to your organization. They're transformational. Mm-hmm. They will change the culture by having one or two of them that are just rocket stars that can absolutely transform your organization. So you're much better off paying and getting those people. How do you identify them versus all the others that seem pretty good, but you just don't know? That's where the experience of properly interviewing, properly qualifying, really understanding from experience what questions to ask and what stories to ask them to tell. And that's something that a really good sales leader can help with. Then when they're in place, retention these days is also a challenge, right? Everybody's jumping ship at a better opportunity, and some people are saying, I don't want to do anything. I'm happy now just, kind of on my own, right?
Right.
So retaining them also involves making sure that they feel challenged, they feel that they're coin operated, so salespeople want to know they can make a lot of money and that the path is there, but also they're getting the support that they need.
Yeah.
And a good sales manager will make sure that these people are on board all the time. And then the ongoing evaluation is also the tricky part. We were talking earlier about how do I know if someone's not working out? And that comes down to, again, the management of accountability, not just sales weekly forecast calls, but really getting into let's walk through your account. Tell me what's going on. Where are you in this stage? Let's role play this situation.
Yeah.
And then being part of these meetings, right? A good sales leader is customer facing and will sit in and just make sure they're watching how the prospect is reacting and how the sales rep is effectively managing the call
Yeah.
to give feedback, coaching, and sometimes to say this just isn't working out. So I think the next
that's
part.
interesting because that becomes a good salesperson's second nature, right? Like that's one of the things that Zoom bothers me about as a salesperson.
Okay.
Because if somebody comes on and they're not on camera, or
Yeah.
because you're looking for those little, like I'm monitoring
Tells.
everyone on the call
Right.
at all times.
That's right.
If I lost somebody, are they
Yeah.
confused? Like any of that.
That's a
Yeah.
great point. And just quickly I'll add on that because it's an excellent point that you make, which is when we were in meetings in person all the time, I had the benefit of kind of walking the room or looking around, and if I saw that you were kind of on your phone, I could pause and say, Eric, I think we've lost you here.
Right.
Sorry if, now I'm on a Zoom call, there's, 15 squares, half of them have a letter because their face is off, and I don't know if P for Polly, I don't know if she's, making a sandwich in the kitchen or she's actually listening to me.
Right.
And then even those that are on, to your point, you catch I don't know if the camera's catching me, but the kind of the eye flit where they're looking, but they're also typing and responding to emails and multitasking.
Yeah, and any of you that are using the blue blocker glasses, we can see everything you're doing.
I can,
Just so
that's right.
you know.
That's right.
It's very reflective.
Right. So in a good meeting, just quickly, establish some ground rules up front.
Yeah.
We've got 30 minutes together. My commitment to you is I'm going to be completely dedicated to this time. I'm not doing anything else. You have my eye contact, full attention. I only ask if I could have the same of you, and I promise I'll make it worthwhile and I'll bring valuable information, et cetera. And at the very least, what it does is it snaps to attention people that maybe were wandering.
Right.
You're not going to get everybody, but I would say that of all the calls I do as a participant, I rarely hear anybody start a call like that. So when we do it as effective salespeople, it's something they don't hear very often. It's like, ooh, I better spring to attention.
Yeah, and even doing just those little tricks that people don't expect, right?
Right.
The self-effacing sometimes, or what? It's something that a salesperson wouldn't necessarily do. That's always
Right.
that's a thing I use. It's just a little way to kind of keep them engaged and
It's humor, self-effacing. That's a whole other subject. I'm a closet stand-up comic, so I've done that in my past, and maybe I'll come back another time and we'll talk about humor in sales.
I'm funny. Probably not.
Yeah, I'm funny in the closet. That's what it means by a closet comedian. Yeah.
Did you do like the stand-up
I
comedy
did. Yeah,
thing?
I've done it
like the
in
Jeff
Atlanta.
Justice?
Yep. And I used to live in Chicago. I've done Zanies. And
okay.
So, but yeah, that's a conversation for another time. But that whole topic of self-effacing, human connection, and then being, using humor when appropriate, really sometimes takes the air out of the tension of someone feeling like, oh, they're here to sell me.
Yeah.
Right. They're in this defensive posture, and then you sort of take the air out. It's like, oh, okay.
Right.
I can relate to
well,
this person.
and often so it's either at the point of like I'm just frustrated and you're going to buy or not. So it's more of that, or just being. I was on a call yesterday with a potential client, and they were asking us about. We have 2 statements of work in front of them, and we had put something in one statement of work but not the other because we saw them as twins, right? And like, well, why didn't you put it in this statement of work? I'm like, because I'm trying to be an honest and fair business person and not double charge you for it, right?
Right.
And you just say it, and they appreciate the fact that you've kind of like let down the guard.
That's
it's
right.
not this formal
Yeah.
thing.
And in sales, there's nothing wrong with upfront saying, we may not be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you permission right now within the first 2 minutes of this meeting that you may reject us.
And I have the same permission.
And that's okay. That's right. I have the permission to reject you.
Yeah, I have the exact same right.
But it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like you can speak openly, and if this isn't a good fit, just tell us because we'll incorporate that feedback and get
or
better.
I can advise you. I could point you to someone. Like
That's
that might
right.
be a better fit for
That's
this.
right.
Like you're really looking. You think you want a full service firm, but you really need just a contractor
That's
or
right.
something, right?
That's right.
Like let's make that because you don't want to get into the bad relationship. That's just the worst on that. Okay,
Yep.
so you got to get a salesperson in place.
You gotta get
that seems really obvious, but it's a hard thing to do.
It is. And a good sales leader. You need somebody who can, when the business owner, so there's 2 ways to go. The business owner can be trained, or they may have someone internally that they really like and say, that's my person that I want to have as a sales leader. And then that person can be coached and we can build infrastructure and process and help that person be successful. And sometimes the business owner says, we don't have anyone, and for me to grow, I can't keep doing this. I'm the critical path to scale.
Right.
So can you, and this is where, we're fractional sales leaders. So we come in on a fractional basis. You don't have to hire a big, expensive, salesperson. But the idea there is, okay, here's someone that can now manage this for me, take it off my hands, get the right salespeople in place, hold them accountable, manage them, and get my sales operation growing to the point that then I can bring in a full-time person or, manage it myself or whatever.
Right.
But get this part of the company beyond what I can do with it.
Yeah, and you talked earlier about salespeople being coin operated. So I
Yes.
have a question for you around
Sure.
that. So I agree with that, but the business. Here's my hypothesis. So I want you to either you can confirm it or you can you're crazy.
Okay.
So the business owner sees a sale almost like a football player does, and it's points on the board, right? It's not necessarily money,
Okay.
because honestly, this business owner may not get any of the money, right? Because they're just basically trying to cover their costs and things like that.
Right.
But that's a side project that we can talk about later. So the business owners never satisfied. They're just never satisfied. They're always going to want to sell the next deal and may see it more of points on the board
Yeah.
than really money, even
Yep.
though it is.
Okay.
And then you talk about salespeople being coin operated, so they're trying to make money.
Yeah.
Do you believe, because I do you believe that there's a limit to how much they want to make?
That the owner wants a salesperson to make, or
no,
the sales rep?
salesperson. The salesperson will get to a point and you have to hire another salesperson because they've made enough and they're going to go off and play golf, or they're going to do
Gotcha.
whatever, right?
Yeah. So there's kind of two answers to that. So one is part of a good sales infrastructure is the right compensation plans.
Okay.
And putting the good comp plans in place that are incentivizing the sales reps to make sure they're focused on the right things. Whether it's quarterly results or certain product sets. I mean, so often the comp plans are misaligned that you don't have the sales rep focused on the right thing. So that's important. I think your question is more along the lines of, is there a point at which a rep kind of gets fat and happy
Yeah.
and pulls back the acceleration pedal?
Yes.
And that's
then
where
you have to replicate to another salesperson.
there's two answers to that. One is, if you have the right salesperson, I would actually argue the answer is no.
Okay.
Because the really good salesperson, if they can make $1 million instead of $500,000, are going to go full force after that.
I would like to hire that person.
Yeah, but that's the person you're looking for. That's the transformational person. The person who says, I made $300K this year, and that's good. I cover my costs, put some money away. I can buy pool for the back, whatever it is.
I've found that the number can be even dramatically lower than that, which is
Right.
always crazy to me.
But that's the wrong person.
Yeah.
So I think if one person is selling so much that they're making all this money, then we do need to scale the sales organization. That means we don't have enough salespeople.
Right.
But if the emotional aspect is that the person's okay
At a certain point.
at a certain point, we've got the wrong person.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the nuance of managing and looking and going, why do you get here and you never get here?
Yeah.
First half of the year, I could see you sold this. Now third quarter, we're trending here. Why? It seems like you're not doing the same things.
Right.
Well, I'm busy. I got some personal there. So you start to kind of try that. But I would go back. I know I'm answering it a different way, but I think that's the wrong salesperson.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Because the way I've built comp plans has been around, and I admittedly, I love our salespeople that we have. So when I say this, just
Insert caveat. Here.
insert caveat, right? But there is this I've built the comp plans because I had salespeople who get to a certain level, and
Yeah.
I know that at that point I have to replicate them to another one
Yes.
because they're fine,
Yeah.
right? They're fine.
Yeah.
They might go out and sell another thing, they
Right.
might not, right?
Right.
And I'm never satisfied because
Right.
I know what we're trying to do from an objective perspective.
Yeah.
Because I sell basically people and paper.
Yeah.
Every time we sell a deal, I gotta go find people, and then
Yeah.
there's just kind of this ongoing thing
Right.
that has to happen.
Right.
So that's interesting to hear you say that. So in this, so you've come in, you've put a process in place, we've hired some salespeople, we have some sales leadership. And is that sales leader I'm setting you up for this question. You might answer it differently, but is the sales leader like my best salesperson? Is that who I should turn into my sales leader?
Not necessarily, and very often the answer is no to that. And the reason for that is the awesome individual contributor and the awesome leader very often have two different skill sets.
Yeah.
The really good salesperson by nature is selfish.
Yeah.
They have territories, my accounts, my comp plan, my money. The best salesperson is always looking for the next dollar, which is why I go back to the best salespeople are never satisfied. Right? If Michael Jordan scored 50, he wanted 80, right? That's what you want. The best leaders, whether it's sales leaders or I would argue any leader, marketing leader, any kind of CEO, are selfless by nature. Their job is to open up the team to 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 and function
That
better.
is really interesting because that's true. So as a business leader, I'm continuing to sell deals because I see the potential of the company, right? Like that's where we're headed. Like this is going to allow us to do more, bring in more people, comp people higher, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So my hunger is around the community. I saw this guy this week, and he was talking about like where you kind of focus. But you're right. Like the best salesperson's like, I want a new car. Right?
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna go buy a house. Like,
And I think what you see sometimes when you take that best salesperson and put them into a leadership role is a lot of times what I've seen is they play hero ball, meaning get out of the way,
I'll just do it.
I'll just do it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't scale. That now you go back to that tribal leader who let me just do it. It's all in my head. So you have a similar set of problems. So it's really important to identify someone that understands sales, but is very willing to allow their team to flourish and make money. And a really good sales leader makes less money than their team.
Yeah.
I've done this for a long time, and my best years were the years where everybody on my team made more than me.
Yeah.
And that's what you want,
Right.
because it means that everybody's doing well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So in our kind of final minutes together, is there anything, because sales is like this, marketing is too, by the way. Marketing is like this big ball of that people think is way simple.
Yeah.
They say the word, sales marketing. And it's like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff. So what are maybe some common mistake you see companies making, or a thing that you wish they wouldn't do anymore? Or what's like your sage advice?
Yeah, I think I would go back to recognizing that sales is sort of part process, part science, part art.
Yeah.
So even when you and I were speaking earlier about process, it's very easy to hear that. And I think one of your questions was, okay, so this sounds a little bit rigid. So I just follow the script and and the answer is no.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have CFOs or COOs who are kind of more operational, and they're like, well, I don't get it. If they just do these 10 things, they're going to go sell.
Right.
Without those 10 things, they're not going to sell.
Yeah.
But then there's the art and the effectiveness. And this is where people like you and others who are in that marketing world, this is where the synergy between marketing and sales is, which is how do I become an effective seller, right? How do I take that, all the work you did on personas, value proposition, go-to-market, ideal client, and how do I take that and package it for a sales team? Because they don't have the benefit of a 30-page document. Right? They gotta pitch it in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So how do I take that and make it effective as a sales leader? And that's where salespeople, sales leaders are so dependent on marketing, and that's why there's such a synergy between the two. So I think, in summary to your question, it's important that companies recognize that you need effective infrastructure, but you need effective leadership, and it's a combination of your best salespeople can't just follow a script.
Right.
They have to have a process, but also be effective. That's why it's so important to hire stellar salespeople.
Well, and looking at marketing as air cover. So I say marketing as air cover. It's the thing that makes the customer pay attention at the first, but then provides the air cover to the salesperson.
That's right.
It allows the sales team to scale.
Yep.
Because if you have to do all the things that marketing's doing to get the person to the door,
Right.
To make sure your reputation looks right,
That's
all
right.
those kind of things.
That's right.
You can't scale the sales team that way anyway, right?
No, yeah.
And then marketing continues on past the sales process, which sales should too, to customer retention and all those kind of things, to just keep all that. Because the brand promise that's created the first time that I kind of introduce or get in front of that company needs to stay throughout.
Yeah.
Right. That's why people buy. That's why they stay.
Yeah.
All those types of things.
And I think that's a great kind of closing point. Also to your question is that the business owner comes to understand that marketing and sales, while different, are the same family.
Yes.
And having a respect for kind of where they each play and how they operate together. Because I think a lot of times the owners, why don't we have more leads, right? Or why are we not closing more business, right? That's their question. And it's like, okay, I get what marketing does, I get what sales does, and how they play together.
Well, because ultimately every leader, like everybody's like, we're like, what are your objectives? Their objective is to make more money.
That's right.
Just literally that is it, right?
Yeah, grow the business, yeah.
Yeah, they'll say, it's like, you want to make more money.
Yeah.
I get it, right?
Yeah.
But there's some things we have to do to get to that point. It may not be,
That's right.
we may not be there yet.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time today. It's been very
this has been
interesting.
fun, Eric.
Yeah, talking about both sides. So you've been listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist with Like Partners. I've been talking with Todd Callen about sales and making sales and marketing work together. We'll put notes and information so that you can get to his company and those types of things all in our show notes. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Claw Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review this podcast. And if you or someone you know wants to make an appearance on this show, email us at yourbestie@ligerpartners.com.